Alara's antennae quivered uncontrollably as she caught sight of the human female, her body instantly flooding with an overwhelming desire she'd never experienced before. The Raymond breeding season had arrived, but this alien creature stirred something far more potent than her species' typical mating urges. The formal reception for the human delegation from the USS Horizon was underway in the Grand Hall of Remoria's capital city. Captain Stephen Ward led his team with practiced diplomacy, unaware of the biological storm brewing within the young Raymond female, observing from the sidelines. Ilara's eyes locked onto communications officer Sarah King, drinking in every detail of the human's form. The gentle curves of her body, so different from the angular Raymond physique, captivated Ilara. Sarah's smooth skin, devoid of the protective exoskeleton that covered Raymond's, looked impossibly soft and inviting. As the humans approached the Raymond elders for introductions, Ilara found herself moving without conscious thought. She pushed through the crowd, driven by an irresistible need to be closer to Sarah. The carefully choreographed ceremony dissolved into chaos as Ilara stumbled forward, her pheromone-addled brain focused solely on reaching the object of her sudden infatuation. Gasps of shock and outrage erupted from the assembled Raymonds. The elders' faces contorted with fury at this unprecedented breach of protocol. Captain Ward's expression shifted from confusion to concern as he realized the delicate first contact was unraveling before his eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" Elder Krax demanded, his voice booming through the hall. "Remove this disruptive youth at once." Ilara barely registered the commotion around her. Her senses were overwhelmed by Sarah's presence. The subtle scent of her skin, the sound of her quickened breathing, the warmth radiating from her body. It took every ounce of Ilara's willpower not to reach out and touch the human female. "I apologize for any offense," Captain Ward said quickly, attempting to salvage the situation. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. We're eager to learn about your customs, and—" "Enough," Elder Krax interrupted. "This disgraceful display cannot be tolerated. You will leave our world immediately." Panic gripped Ilara as she realized her actions might cost her people a valuable alliance and deny her the chance to learn more about Sarah and the humans. She forced herself to step back, fighting against every instinct that screamed at her to claim the human as her mate. Captain Ward, recognizing the precarious position they were in, switched tactics. "Elder Krax, I respectfully request that you allow us to remain for 1 week," he proposed. "This will give us time to address any misunderstandings and demonstrate our sincere desire for peaceful relations between our peoples." The Raymond elders conferred in hushed tones, their antennae twitching with agitation. Finally, Elder Krax turned back to the humans. "We will permit this, but you will be under constant supervision," he declared. "And you," he added, fixing Ilara with a stern glare, "will serve as liaison to the human delegation. Perhaps this will teach you to control your base impulses." Ilara's heart raced at the prospect of working closely with Sarah, even as fear clenched her stomach. How could she possibly control herself when every fiber of her being yearned for the human female? As she watched Sarah and the other humans being led to their assigned quarters, Ilara knew that the next 7 days would test her resolve like nothing she had ever faced before. The fate of 2 worlds now hung in the balance, all because an alien girl in breeding season couldn't resist the gorgeous human girl who had unknowingly captured her heart. As the human delegation settled into their quarters, Ilara paced anxiously in her private chamber. The weight of her new responsibilities as liaison pressed heavily upon her, compounded by the relentless surge of desire that coursed through her body. She took several deep breaths, willing her antennae to stop their incessant quivering. The next morning, Ilara led the humans to their first official meeting with the Riemann Council. As she walked beside Sarah King, she found herself acutely aware of every movement the human made. The soft rustle of Sarah's uniform, the gentle sway of her hair, even the rhythm of her breathing sent jolts of electricity through Ilara's nervous system. During the meeting, Ilara struggled to maintain her composure. As she translated the complex trade agreements being discussed, her voice wavered and she stumbled over words. At one point, her hand accidentally brushed against Sarah's arm, causing Ilara to let out an involuntary chirp of pleasure. The room fell silent, and Elder Krax fixed her with a withering glare. "Is there a problem, Liaison Ilara?" he asked, his tone sharp. No, Elder," Ilara stammered, her exoskeleton flushing a deeper shade of blue. "I apologize for the interruption." Captain Stephen Ward observed the exchange with a furrowed brow. As the meeting concluded, he pulled his chief medical officer aside. "Dr. Reeves," he said in a low voice, "I need you to look into Raymond biology. There's something off about our young liaison's behavior, and I want to know if it's a cultural misunderstanding or something more physiological." Dr. Marcus Reeves nodded, his scientific curiosity piqued. "I'll get right on it, Captain. I'll have Liam assist me with the data collection." As the days progressed, Dr. Reeves and Science Officer Liam Parker conducted discrete scans of the Raymond population. They focused their efforts on social gatherings, using advanced tricorders to analyze physiological responses during various interactions. Meanwhile, Ilara found herself constantly shadowed by Cora, a stern-faced Raymond security officer. Cora's watchful presence added another layer of stress to Ilara's already fragile state. On the third day of the human stay, Sarah approached Ilara with an idea. "I was thinking," she said, her voice sending shivers down Ilara's spine, "it might be nice to show your people some human recreational activities, a cultural exchange of sorts." Ilara's antennae perked up at the suggestion. "That sounds interesting," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'll speak with the elders about arranging it." To Ilara's surprise, the elders approved the idea, seeing it as an opportunity to gather more information about human behavior. The next day, the USS Horizon crew set up a variety of games and sports equipment in a clearing near their landing site. Ilara watched in fascination as the humans demonstrated their activities. She found herself mesmerized by Sarah's grace as she played a game called volleyball, leaping and diving with fluid movements that sent waves of longing through Ilara's body. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah invited one of her male crewmates to demonstrate a human dance. Ilara's initial curiosity turned to anguish as she watched Sarah press close to her partner, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization to an alien rhythm. Unable to bear the sight any longer, Ilara turned and fled into the nearby forest. She ran until her legs gave out, collapsing against a tree trunk as sobs racked her body. The maelstrom of emotions, jealousy, desire, shame, threatened to overwhelm her. Back at the recreation area, Cora observed Ilara's abrupt departure with narrowed eyes. She tapped a communication device on her wrist, speaking in rapid-fire Raymond to her superiors. In the privacy of the medical lab aboard the USS Horizon, Dr. Reeves and Officer Parker pored over their collected data. "Look at these pheromone levels," Liam said, pointing to a graph on the screen. "They're off the charts, especially in our young liaison." Dr. Reeves nodded, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "And see how they spike when she's near Ensign King? I think we may have stumbled onto something significant here." After several hours of analysis, they brought their findings to Captain Ward. The captain listened intently as Dr. Reeves explained their theory about the interaction between human and Raymond pheromones. "So you're saying that Sarah is unintentionally triggering some kind of mating response in Ilara?" Ward asked, his expression grave. "That's our hypothesis," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "But to be certain, we'd need to run more focused tests. Specifically, we'd need to use Sarah as a test subject." Captain Ward's frown deepened. "That's a risky proposition, Doctor. If the Raymonds were to find out—" "I understand the concerns, Captain," Reeves said. "But this information could be crucial in preventing a diplomatic incident. If we can understand what's happening, we might be able to mitigate it." After a long moment of deliberation, Ward nodded. "All right, but I want full disclosure to Ensign King. This has to be her choice." When Sarah was brought into the captain's ready room and briefed on the situation, her eyes widened in surprise. "So that's why Ilara's been acting so strangely around me," she mused. "Of course I'll help. What do you need me to do?" As night fell on Remoria, 3 separate plans were set in motion. In the Riemann war room, Elder Krax and his advisors finalized their strategy to expel the humans forcefully. In the USS Horizon's medical bay, Dr. Reeves prepared his equipment for the delicate experiments ahead. And in the depths of the Remorian forest, Ilara made a decision that would change everything. Guided by an instinct she couldn't explain, Ilara began to make her way back towards the human settlement. Her heart raced with equal parts fear and anticipation as she moved silently through the shadows. She had to see Sarah to explain, to understand these feelings that threatened to consume her. As Ilara approached the outskirts of the human camp, she was unaware of the multiple forces converging around her. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with her at the center of a storm she could never have imagined. Predicted. The forest shadows stretched long as Ilara emerged from the tree line, her eyes fixed on the human settlement glowing softly in the twilight. Her antennae twitched, picking up unfamiliar scents carried on the evening breeze. In the makeshift laboratory at the edge of the camp, Dr. Reeves and Officer Parker worked with quiet efficiency, setting up delicate equipment. Sarah King stood nearby, her fingers drumming nervously against her thigh as she watched the preparations. "Are you sure about this, Ensign?" Dr. Reeves asked, looking up from a console. Sarah nodded, her mind focused. "Absolutely, Doctor. If this can help prevent a diplomatic disaster, I'm all in." As Sarah settled into the monitoring chair, Dr. Reeves carefully adjusted a series of vials containing synthesized Raman pheromones. "We'll start with a low concentration and gradually increase it," he explained. "Let us know immediately if you experience any discomfort." Officer Parker activated the environmental controls, and a fine mist began to permeate the air around Sarah. At first she noticed nothing unusual, but as the concentration increased, a warm, tingling sensation spread across her skin. "I feel different," Sarah murmured, her eyes widening. "It's hard to describe, like my senses are sharper somehow." Dr. Reeves leaned in, studying the readouts on his tricorder. "Fascinating. Your body is producing some kind of biochemical response to the Raman pheromones. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Outside the lab, Ilara crept closer to the human settlement, her heart pounding. The scent of Sarah lingered in the air, mixed with something else, something that made Ilara's entire body thrum with energy. Without realizing it, her skin began to emit a soft, pulsing glow. Commander Zax, leading his team of Raman warriors through the underbrush, froze as he caught sight of the bioluminescent figure. "There!" he hissed to his squad. "The traitor reveals herself." Inside the lab, Sarah gasped as a wave of sensation washed over her. Her skin flushed, and she gripped the arms of the chair tightly. "Something's happening," she said, her voice husky. I can't explain it." Dr. Reeves's eyes widened as he observed the readings. "Incredible. Your body isn't just responding to the Raman pheromones. It's synthesizing its own unique version, a hybrid of human and Raman biochemistry." Before anyone could react further, the door to the lab burst open. Ilara stood in the doorway, her form glowing brightly, eyes locked on Sarah. The human scientist stumbled back in shock, but Sarah rose from her chair as if in a trance. "Ilara," Sarah breathed, taking a step forward. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy. "Sarah," Ilara replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I had to see you. I had to understand." As the two moved towards each other, drawn by an irresistible force, chaos erupted outside. Commander Zax and his warriors surrounded the lab, their own bodies beginning to react to the cocktail of pheromones in the air. "Surrender now!" Zax bellowed, his voice strained as he fought against his own instincts. "Hand over the humans and the corrupted one." Inside the lab, Dr. Reeves and Officer Parker exchanged panicked glances. Sarah and Ilara stood frozen, hands almost touching, caught in a moment of connection that transcended species. The tense tableau was shattered by the arrival of Captain Ward and his security team, their weapons drawn. "Stand down," Ward shouted, assessing the situation quickly. "We can determination this peacefully." Commander Zax snarled, his warriors shifting restlessly behind him. The Raman soldiers' aggressive pheromones mingled with the hybrid scent emanating from the lab, creating a volatile atmosphere. In the center of the maelstrom, Sarah and Ilara remained fixated on each other, oblivious to the chaos around them. Their fingers intertwined, sending a visible shudder through both their bodies. "Captain," Dr. Reeves called out, his voice urgent. "We've made a discovery. The interaction between human and Raman biochemistry. It could be the key to understanding each other. Ward's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the powder keg before him. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with Alara and Sarah's unprecedented connection at the center of it all. "Commander Zax," Ward said, lowering his weapon slightly. "Look at them. This isn't corruption, it's connection, a bridge between our peoples." Zax's antennae twitched as he struggled against the conflicting impulses surging through him. His eyes darted between the glowing form of Alara, the flushed face of Sarah, and the tense stance of the human captain. In that moment of hesitation, a low hum began to emanate from where Sarah and Alara stood, joined. Their bodies glowed in unison, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to resonate through the air. The Raymond warriors lowered their weapons, transfixed by the sight. "What's happening?" Officer Parker whispered, his tricorder beeping rapidly as it recorded the phenomenon. Dr. Reeves shook his head in wonder. "I think we're witnessing the birth of something entirely new, a synthesis of human and Raymond biology that could change everything." As the glow intensified, bathing the area in soft light, the aggressive postures of both humans and Raymonds began to soften. The atmosphere of tension and hostility gradually gave way to one of awe and curiosity. Captain Ward, sensing a shift in the dynamic, took a careful step forward. "Commander Zax," he said quietly, "I propose we call a temporary truce. Let our scientists work together to understand what's happening here. It could be the foundation for a new era of cooperation between our peoples." Zax's eyes never left the pulsing glow of Sarah and Alara as he considered Ward's words. The breeding seasons influenced Ward with his training and duty, creating a storm of conflicting emotions within him. As dawn began to break over the horizon, casting its first tentative rays across the scene, all present held their breath. The next few moments would determine whether this unprecedented encounter would end in violence or usher in a new age of interspecies understanding. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, with Sarah and Alara's connection at the epicenter of a potential revolution in human-Reman relations. As the new day dawned, the question remained, would this be remembered as the start of a beautiful partnership or the prelude to an interstellar conflict? The tense tableau held for a moment longer, then shattered as Captain Ward took a decisive step forward. His voice rang out, clear and firm, cutting through the charged atmosphere. "Commander Zax, I implore you to consider the implications of what we're witnessing here," Ward said, gesturing towards Sarah and Alara. "This isn't a threat to your people. It's an opportunity for understanding, for growth." Zax's antennae twitched, his grip on his weapon tightening. The pheromone-laden air seemed to cloud his judgment, conflicting impulses warring across his features. "You know nothing of our ways, human," he snarled, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Before Ward could respond, a gasp rippled through the assembled crowd. Sarah and Alara, still locked in their intimate connection, began to undergo startling physical changes. Alara's bioluminescent glow intensified, pulsing with a mesmerizing rhythm that bathed the area in ethereal light. Intricate patterns danced across her skin, reminiscent of ancient Riemann symbols. Sarah's transformation was equally dramatic. Her skin took on a subtle shimmering quality, as if countless microscopic crystals had embedded themselves just beneath the surface. The effect was beautiful and alien, a bridge between human and Riemann physiologies. Dr. Reeves's eyes widened as he studied the readouts on his tricorder. "Captain," he called out, his voice thick with excitement, "the biochemical reaction, it's harmonizing their physiologies. I've never seen anything like it." Ward turned to Zax, seizing the moment. "You see, this isn't corruption or violation. It's synthesis, Commander. A new path forward for both our species." Some of the Reman warriors began to lower their weapons, curiosity overtaking aggression. They leaned forward, drawn by the hypnotic display before them. Zax, however, remained rigid, torn between duty and the undeniable evidence of his senses. The stalemate was broken by the arrival of a new group. Elder Raymonds, their robes billowing in the night air, approached the standoff site. At their head strode Matriarch Vex, her ancient eyes taking in the scene with keen interest. "What chaos is this?" Vex demanded, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Explain yourselves, all of you. Captain Ward stepped forward, bowing his head respectfully. Matriarch, we stand at the cusp of a remarkable discovery. Our peoples, long separated by mistrust and misunderstanding, may have more in common than we ever realized. As Ward and Dr. Reeves hastily explained the situation, Ilara and Sarah's bond continued to intensify. The patterns on Ilara's skin shifted and swirled, responding to Sarah's touch with bursts of color and light. Sarah's shimmering skin seemed to resonate in turn, creating a feedback loop of biochemical communication. Matriarch Vex listened intently, her gaze never leaving the entwined figures of Ilara and Sarah. As the explanation concluded, she raised a gnarled hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the crowd. In all my years, Vex said slowly, I have never witnessed such a thing. Commander Zax, lower your weapons. This event requires further study. Zax's mandibles clicked in surprise. But Matriarch, our traditions have brought us here, to this moment, Vex interrupted. Perhaps it is time we consider new ways. She turned to Captain Ward. You have permission to continue your research under our supervision. These two, she gestured to Ilara and Sarah, will be your primary subjects, with their consent. A ripple of shock passed through both human and Raymond onlookers. Ward nodded, relief evident in his posture. Thank you, Matriarch. We will proceed with the utmost care and respect. As the immediate crisis subsided, the two groups began to mingle cautiously. Young Raymonds approached the humans, their antennae twitching with curiosity. Conversations started in hesitant whispers, growing louder as initial fears gave way to genuine interest. Captain Ward tapped his communicator. Ward to Horizon. We need additional scientific personnel and equipment. On the surface immediately, we're setting up an expanded research facility. In the center of it all, Ilara and Sarah remained locked in their intimate connection, oblivious to the momentous changes occurring around them. Their unique bond had become a living symbol of potential, a bridge between two worlds that had long viewed each other with suspicion and fear. As the first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, a new sense of possibility hung in the air. Humans and Raymonds alike found themselves reassessing long-held beliefs, wondering what other surprises awaited in this new era of cooperation. But not everyone welcomed this change. In the shadows beyond the clearing, General Krav watched the proceedings with narrowed eyes. His mandibles clicked in barely suppressed rage as he observed his fellow Raymonds fraternizing with the humans. This cannot be allowed to continue, Krav muttered to his aide. Gather our most loyal supporters. We must act quickly to preserve our way of life. As Krav slipped away to begin his plotting, the clearing bustled with activity. Scientists from both species began setting up equipment, eager to unravel the mysteries of the biochemical bond between Ilara and Sarah. The air hummed with excitement and apprehension, the first tentative steps of a new chapter in human-Raymond relations, being written before their eyes. The stage was set for a complex interplay of scientific discovery, cultural exchange, and potential conflict. As the new day dawned on Remoria, only one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. As the first rays of dawn painted the Remorian sky, the clearing that had been a site of tense standoff mere hours ago transformed into a hub of scientific activity. The impromptu research facility buzzed with energy as human and Raman scientists worked side by side, their previous mistrust giving way to shared curiosity. Dr. Reeves, his eyes bright with excitement despite the lack of sleep, directed his expanded team as they set up sophisticated equipment. The arrival of additional personnel and resources from the USS Horizon had accelerated their efforts exponentially. Careful with that spectrometer, he called out to a young ensign. We need precise readings on the pheromone interactions. At the center of this whirlwind of activity stood Ilara and Sarah, still caught in the throes of their unique connection. The pulsing glow that emanated from their joined forms had diminished slightly but remained visible, casting an ethereal light over the research stations. Captain Ward approached the pair, his expression a mix of concern and fascination. Ilara, Sarah, he said gently, I know you've been through a lot, but we need your help. Are you willing to participate in some controlled experiments? It could be crucial for understanding what's happening between you. Sarah blinked as if coming out of a trance. She looked at Alara, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Yes, Captain," Sarah replied, her voice slightly hoarse. "We want to help." As the scientists began their first round of tests, Ward turned his attention to the broader implications of the night's events. He tapped his communicator. "Ward to Commander Morrison." "Morrison here, sir," came the prompt reply. "Jack, I need you to oversee a series of cultural exchange events between our people and the Raymonds. We've opened a door here, and I want to make sure we walk through it properly." "Understood, Captain. I'll start making arrangements immediately." As Ward coordinated with his first officer, tension simmered beneath the surface of Raymond society. In a dimly lit underground bunker, General Krav paced before a group of grim-faced warriors. "Our very way of life is under threat," Krav hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "These humans would have us abandon our traditions, our very nature. We cannot allow it." A young warrior named Zira shifted uncomfortably. "But General, if there's a way to reduce the violence of our mating practices—" Krav silenced her with a sharp gesture. "That violence is part of who we are, Zira. It makes us strong. We will not let these outsiders weaken us." As Krav outlined his plan to sabotage the research facility, back at the site, Dr. Reeves made a startling discovery. He burst from his makeshift lab, waving a data pad excitedly. "Captain Ward, Commander Zax," he called out. "You need to see this." The two leaders hurried over, their previous animosity forgotten in the face of scientific breakthrough. "The hybrid pheromones," Reeves explained, his words tumbling out in a rush. "They're not just affecting Alara and Sarah. Look at these readings from the Riemann volunteers." Ward scanned the data, his eyebrows rising. "Are you saying—" "Yes," Reeves nodded emphatically. "These pheromones have the potential to significantly reduce the violent tendencies associated with Riemann mating practices. It's incredible." The news spread quickly through the compound, eliciting a range of reactions. Many younger Raymonds expressed excitement at the possibility of evolving their reproductive methods, while older, more conservative members of the society watched with wary eyes. As the day progressed, an air of anticipation built throughout the facility. Word had spread that Matriarch Vex herself was coming to inspect the research. Humans and Raymonds alike scrambled to prepare for her arrival. When Vex finally appeared, flanked by her advisors, a hush fell over the compound. Her ancient eyes took in the flurry of activity, lingering on the joined forms of Alara and Sarah. "Show me," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Dr. Reeves guided the matriarch through the facility, explaining their findings with barely suppressed enthusiasm. They paused to watch Alara and Sarah undergo a series of coordination tests, their movements perfectly synchronized, anticipating each other's actions with uncanny precision. Vex's expression remained unreadable, but her antennae twitched with interest. As the tour concluded, she turned to address the assembled crowd. "What I have witnessed here today," she began, her voice carrying across the hushed gathering, "represents a potential turning point for our people. I propose a pilot program to explore the integration of these new mating practices into our society." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some Raymonds chittered excitedly, while others shifted uneasily. In the shadows at the edge of the gathering, General Krav's fist clenched in barely suppressed rage. As night fell, Alara and Sarah were led to especially prepared quarters within the facility. Exhaustion etched on their faces. They collapsed onto separate beds, their bodies still humming with the day's heightened connection. Outside their room, the effects of their unique bond continued to ripple through the compound. Raymonds and humans alike reported feeling unusually calm, their senses heightened in unexpected ways. In the cover of darkness, General Krav set his plan in motion. He nodded to Zira and the rest of his team. "Move out," he growled. "It's time to put an end to this abomination." As Krav's saboteurs infiltrated the facility, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of the newfound human-Raman cooperation and the mysterious bond between Alara and Sarah. Sarah and Alara's eyes snapped open simultaneously, their bodies tensing as they sensed the approaching danger. Without a word, they rose from their beds, moving in perfect synchronization. "Something's wrong," Sarah whispered, her skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. Ilara nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with urgency. We need to move. They slipped out of their quarters, entering the corridor just as the first sounds of commotion echoed through the facility. Alarms blared and panicked shouts filled the air. The two women moved swiftly, guided by an instinct they couldn't fully comprehend. As they navigated the winding hallways, a remarkable phenomenon unfolded in their wake. The chaos that engulfed the facility seemed to part around them like water around a stone. Humans and Remans alike, caught in their path, experienced a sudden wave of calm. Aggression melted away, replaced by an inexplicable sense of cooperation. A group of panicked scientists rushing to secure their data stumbled into Sarah and Ilara's path. The lead researcher, his eyes wild with fear, froze as the hybrid pheromones washed over him. His breathing slowed, and clarity returned to his gaze. This way, he said, gesturing to a nearby lab. We need to protect the core data servers. Sarah and Ilara exchanged a glance, a wordless understanding passing between them. They followed the scientists, their presence continuing to create an island of calm in the sea of chaos. Meanwhile, Captain Ward and Commander Zax led their joint security team through the facility, their previous animosity forgotten in the face of the current crisis. They moved methodically, neutralizing General Krav's saboteurs with precision and efficiency. As they turned a corner, they encountered a young Reman warrior named Zira. Her weapon was raised, but her hands trembled. The lingering pheromones in the air had affected her, sowing doubt where once there had been only conviction. Ward stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. It's not too late to make the right choice, Zira. Zira's antenna twitched, her inner conflict evident in her posture. Finally, she lowered her weapon. I can't do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Krav plans to destroy the core data servers. He's heading for the central lab. Zax clicked his mandibles in approval. Thank you, Zira. Your bravery will not be forgotten. As Ward and Zax continued their sweep, Dr. Reeves and his team worked frantically in the main research lab. Screens flickered with data as they initiated an emergency backup protocol. Transfer rates at 60%, a human technician called out. Faster, Reeves urged, his fingers flying over a control panel. We can't risk losing any of this data. As they worked, a Reman scientist monitoring the pheromone levels suddenly straightened, his antennae quivering with excitement. Dr. Reeves, you need to see this. Reeves hurried over, his eyes widening as he took in the readings. These levels, they're off the charts. The bond between Ilara and Sarah, it's intensifying. In another part of the facility, General Krav fought his way towards the central lab, his face contorted with rage. As he progressed, he encountered increasingly disoriented opposition. Both humans and Raymans seemed to lose their will to fight as he approached, affected by the trail of pheromones left by Ilara and Sarah. Krav's military training allowed him to push through the biochemical haze, but even he felt its effects. Doubt began to creep into the edges of his mind, but he shook it off, focusing on his mission. The sound of authoritative footsteps echoed through the corridor behind him. Matriarch Vex, her ancient eyes blazing with willpower, strode forward, flanked by loyal Reman guards. Enough, Krav! Her voice rang out, carrying the weight of centuries. This ends now. Krav hesitated for a moment, torn between his respect for the matriarch and his fanatical devotion to tradition. With a snarl, he turned and continued towards the central lab, ignoring Vex's command. As Ilara and Sarah approached the central lab, their physiological changes intensified. Ilara's bioluminescence brightened, intricate patterns swirling across her skin. Sarah's complexion took on an iridescent quality, shimmering with subtle hues that shifted in the light. They paused at the entrance to the lab, a shared sensation of impending danger washing over them. Without a word, they moved towards the core data servers, positioning themselves protectively in front of the vital equipment. Moments later, the door burst open. General Krav stood in the entrance, his weapon raised, chest heaving with exertion and almost unchecked rage. His eyes locked onto Ilara and Sarah, narrowing with hatred. You, he spat, you're the cause of all this. Our way of life destroyed because of you. He took a step forward but faltered as the concentrated pheromones hit him like a physical wave. His arm trembled, the weapon wavering in his grasp. Ilara, driven by an overwhelming urge to protect Sarah, stepped forward. Her bioluminescence flared brilliantly, creating mesmerizing patterns that captivated both Sarah and the faltering general. "This isn't destruction, Krav," Ilara said, her voice soft but firm. "It's evolution, growth, the chance for both our species to become something greater." She reached out, her hand gently touching Krav's arm. The effect was immediate and profound. The general's eyes widened, his weapon clattering to the floor as a rush of empathy and understanding flooded through him. I understand," Krav whispered, tears forming in his eyes. "What have I done?" As Krav sank to his knees, overwhelmed by emotion, Captain Ward and Commander Zax burst into the lab with their security team. They took in the scene, Krav subdued, Ilara and Sarah standing protectively over the servers. "Is everyone all right?" Ward asked, lowering his weapon. Sarah nodded, moving to stand beside Ilara. "We're fine, Captain. I think it's over." As the security team secured Krav, Dr. Reeves rushed into the lab, his eyes immediately drawn to the readings on his handheld scanner. "Incredible," he breathed, circling Ilara and Sarah. "The pheromone levels. I've never seen anything like this. We may have just witnessed a quantum leap in human-Riemann biochemical compatibility." Outside the lab, the news of Krav's defeat spread quickly. The remaining saboteurs, affected by the lingering pheromones and demoralized by their leader's capture, surrendered without further resistance. As the facility slowly returned to normal operations, a palpable sense of change hung in the air. Humans and Riemans alike recognized that they stood at the threshold of a new era of interspecies cooperation. Matriarch Vex, surveying the scene in the central lab, nodded slowly. "It seems," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the moment, "that we have much to discuss. Captain Ward, I believe it's time we convene an emergency council meeting. The future of both our species may well depend on what we decide here." Ward nodded, keenly aware of the enormity of the situation. As he began coordinating with his crew and the Riemann leaders, Ilara and Sarah stood quietly to the side, their hands intertwined. Their bond, now stronger than ever, hummed with potential, a living symbol of what their two species might achieve together. Yet even as the immediate crisis passed, new questions arose. The long-term effects of the hybrid pheromones, the ethical implications of biochemical bonding, and the potential resistance from other conservative factions loomed on the horizon. The path forward would not be easy, but for the first time, both humans and Riemans faced the future with a shared sense of hope and possibility. As the dust settled from the failed sabotage attempt, a new energy pulsed through the human Riemann research facility. The air buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, the recent events having opened doors to possibilities previously unimagined. Captain Ward stood at the head of a large conference table, his gaze sweeping over the assembled faces, human and Riemann alike. The newly established Human-Riemann Council sat before him, a living testament to the unprecedented cooperation between their species. "We stand at a crossroads," Ward began, his voice firm yet tinged with cautious optimism. "The events of the past few days have shown us both the potential and the risks of our continued collaboration. It's clear we need a more structured approach moving forward." Matriarch Vex nodded, her ancient eyes gleaming with a wisdom that transcended species. "Indeed, Captain, the path ahead is uncertain, but it is one we must walk together." Dr. Reeves leaned forward, barely able to contain his enthusiasm. "I propose we expand our research program, focusing on Ilara and Sarah's unique bond. The potential applications of their hybrid pheromones could revolutionize both our societies." Commander Zax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Agreed, but we must proceed with caution. The consequences of altering our biochemistry could be far-reaching." As the council debated the finer points of the expanded research program, Ilara and Sarah sat in a quiet corner of the lab, their hands intertwined. Ilara's bioluminescence pulsed gently, creating intricate patterns that danced across her skin in response to Sarah's touch. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, her voice soft with concern. Ilara smiled, her glow brightening. Different. Stronger. Like we're on the verge of something incredible. Their moment of peace was interrupted by Dr. Reeves, who approached with a handheld scanner. Ilara, Sarah, we're ready to begin the next phase of tests. Are you prepared? They nodded in unison, rising to follow the doctor. As they walked, other researchers, both human and Riemann, paused in their work, drawn by the subtle yet powerful aura emanating from the pair. In another part of the facility, a group of Raman couples gathered nervously. They had volunteered for a pilot program to explore alternative mating practices, inspired by Ilara and Sarah's bond. Dr. Naira, a progressive Raman scientist, addressed the group. You are pioneers, she said, her antenna twitching with excitement. Your participation in this study could reshape our understanding of Raman biology and social structures. As the days passed, the effects of the research began to ripple outward. Reports trickled in from Raman communities near the human settlement of decreased aggression and increased social bonding. The news sparked heated debates among Raman authorities, torn between the potential benefits and the fear of losing their traditional ways. Matriarch Vex, ever the visionary, commissioned a comprehensive study on the societal impact of the hybrid pheromones. We must understand the full scope of these changes, she declared to the council. Our decisions now will shape the future of both our species. The USS Horizon hummed with activity as the crew prepared for the arrival of Admiral Jenna Hayes. Captain Ward paced the bridge, his mind racing with the implications of Starfleet's increased interest in their work. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Hayes. She's requesting an update on the situation before her arrival. Ward nodded, straightening his uniform. Patch her through to my ready room. As he briefed the Admiral, construction crews on the surface of Remoria worked tirelessly to expand the human settlement. The sound of machinery and voices, human and Raman, filled the air, a cacophony of progress and change. Not everyone welcomed these developments. In the shadows of Raman society, Colonel Vax gathered his supporters, his voice low and urgent. We cannot stand idle while our way of life is eroded, he hissed. We must act for the sake of our future generations. Back in the research facility, Ilara and Sarah underwent another round of tests. As they moved in perfect synchronization through a series of coordination exercises, Dr. Reeves watched in awe, his scanner beeping frantically. Extraordinary, he muttered. The complexity of their biochemical interactions is increasing exponentially. It's almost as if... His thought was interrupted by a commotion from the archaeology team. A breathless researcher burst into the lab, clutching a strange crystalline object. Doctor, you need to see this, she gasped. We found it during the excavation for the new settlement. It's reacting to the hybrid pheromones. Dr. Reeves' eyes widened as he examined the artifact. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, pulsing in rhythm with Ilara's bioluminescence. This could change everything, he breathed. We need to organize an expedition immediately. There could be more artifacts like this, holding the key to understanding the evolutionary history of Raman mating practices. As word of the discovery spread, Ilara and Sarah approached Captain Ward. We want to join the expedition, Ilara said, her voice firm with determination. Ward hesitated, weighing the potential benefits against the risks. I'll need to discuss this with the council, he said finally, but I can see the value in having you there. As preparations for the expedition began in earnest, tensions simmered beneath the surface of Raman society. Colonel Vax and his followers watched and waited, their plans taking shape in the shadows. The stage was set for a journey into the unknown, with the potential to unlock secrets long buried in Remoria's past. But as Ilara and Sarah prepared to face this new challenge together, little did they know that forces were aligning against them, threatening to shatter the fragile peace between humans and Ramans. As the joint human-Raman expedition prepared to depart, the air crackled with a mixture of excitement and tension. Ilara and Sarah stood near the transport vehicles, their hands clasped tightly together. Ilara's bioluminescence pulsed with a nervous energy, reflecting the atmosphere of anticipation that surrounded them. Captain Ward approached the pair, his face etched with concern. Are you sure you want to go through with this? We don't know what we might encounter out there. Sarah nodded firmly. We're sure, Captain. Our presence could be crucial to understanding whatever we find. As the team began to board the transports, Alara suddenly stiffened. Her antennae twitched and her eyes widened. Wait, she said, her voice urgent. Something's wrong. Sarah felt it too, a wave of malevolent intent washing over her. She squeezed Alara's hand. You're right. It's coming from over there. They turned in unison, their gazes fixed on a cluster of crates near the perimeter of the launch area. Captain Ward, noticing their reaction, immediately signaled to his security team. Check those crates, he ordered. Now! As the security officers approached, a group of Raymans burst from behind the containers. Leading them was Colonel Vax, his mandibles clicking in fury as he raised a weapon. Stop this madness, he roared. We will not allow our ways to be corrupted. But before Vax could fire, he stumbled, a look of confusion crossing his face. The other saboteurs faltered as well, their weapons wavering. Alara and Sarah stepped forward, their combined pheromones creating a visible shimmer in the air. The effect on Vax and his followers was immediate. Their aggressive stances softened, their eyes widening in bewilderment. Captain Ward seized the moment. Security team, move in! Within minutes, Vax and his compatriots were disarmed and detained. As they were led away, Vax looked back at Alara and Sarah, his expression a mixture of fear and awe. With the immediate threat neutralized, the expedition set out. The journey to the archaeological site was tense, but uneventful. As they approached their destination, Dr. Reeves's excitement became palpable. The readings are off the charts, he exclaimed, studying his instruments. There's something big down there. The team descended into a vast network of underground caverns. The walls glistened with moisture, and the strange phosphorescent fungi cast an eerie glow. As they ventured deeper, Ilara's bioluminescence began to pulse more rapidly. I feel something, she said, her voice hushed with wonder. It's like a call, pulling me forward. They rounded a corner and collectively gasped. Before them stood an enormous Raymond temple, its walls adorned with crystalline structures that glowed with an inner light. As Alara approached, the crystals pulsed in perfect synchronization with her own luminescence. Sarah watched in amazement as Alara placed her hand on one of the crystals. The entire temple seemed to come alive, the light growing brighter and more intense. Dr. Naira, the Riemann scientist, chittered excitedly. This is incredible. These crystals, they're reacting to Ilara's unique biochemistry. As Alara and Sarah moved deeper into the temple, the crystals continued to react, creating a path of light that led them to a central chamber. At its heart stood an ornate altar, covered in intricate carvings. Dr. Reeves hurried forward, his scanner whirring. These symbols, they're unlike anything in our Raman linguistic database, but they seem to be describing some kind of bonding ritual. Ilara and Sarah approached the altar, drawn by an irresistible force. As they stood before it, their hands intertwined, a sudden surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. The altar split open, revealing a hidden compartment filled with strange, organic-looking devices. By the stars, Dr. Naira breathed. This is ancient Reman biotechnology. I've never seen anything like it. As the scientists swarmed around the newfound treasures, Ilara and Sarah remained rooted in place, their connection to each other and to the temple growing stronger by the moment. The air around them shimmered with pheromones, creating a visible aura that pulsed in time with the temple's crystals. Captain Ward watched the scene unfold, his comlink chirping urgently. Ward here, he answered. Captain, came the voice of his security chief. We've got a situation topside. Colonel Vax has escaped custody and rallied more supporters. They're heading your way, armed and in force. Ward's teeth gritted. Understood. Implement Security Protocol Omega. We'll prepare down here. As he relayed the information to the team, tension filled the air, but Ilara and Sarah remained calm, their eyes meeting in silent communication. We can handle this, Sarah said softly. Together. Ilara nodded, her antennae quivering with dedication. Yes, It's time to show them the true power of our bond. As the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the cavern, Alara and Sarah took their position at the temple's entrance. Behind them, the research team worked feverishly to understand the ancient technology they had uncovered. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with the next few moments poised to change everything.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.